in the middle of class. No.
Okay.
Let it go to, will it hurt your chances if your interview call comes and you let it go to voicemail? No, it's far better to let it go to voicemail if you're in the middle of class, politely excuse yourself, or wait till the break and call them back. Chances are when you see the number, you know it might be them if you just applied within the last 2 weeks. So you're going to find a quiet classroom that no one's in. You're going to tell your teacher to be back in 10 minutes. You have a job that you're calling back on. And you're going to have maybe that folder that you printed out those jobs. So you have that as reference when they say, hey, can you tell us about this skill that you have? We want to see if you'd be a good candidate to come in for an interview. So it's much better if you let it go to voicemail when it's not the appropriate time to talk. If you have to whisper because you're at your current job, it's not going to be good. And talking in stairwells usually echoes. I know this from experience. We talked about the follow-up. When it says, okay, so say you found a job on Craigslist, it's really cool. Harmonics posted on Craigslist was free. And you applied 2 weeks ago, and then you sent a follow-up email, and then they still didn't get back to you. And it says, no phone calls, please. Should you call? That's one of those questions you're going to have to answer yourself. I say, why not? You've got nothing to lose because they still haven't called you. Yeah, it could ruin your chances. They could be like, we said no calls. Cross them off the list. You can't follow directions. They could say that, and then you're screwed. Chances are they're going to be like, oh, I was really busy, but this person's been persistent. Hey, they're on the phone now. I'll set up a time to have them come in for an interview. Could happen. What risk you want to, have in which outcome is up to you. But I can tell you that no phone calls, please, is an automatic setting when you post a Craigslist ad. It's not something they actually typed. So they probably forgot that it's even there. So as far as Craigslist goes, I'd say go ahead and call them if it's been at least 2 weeks, or especially 4 weeks. They haven't called you back anyway. What's the worst that can happen? How do you get their phone number? That's a whole other thing. Research tools, if you want to know, we'll get to that later on. I'll tell you how you can really dig and stalk people online. Phone etiquette. We just talked about taking phone calls in appropriate places. Make sure that you speak clearly and enunciate. Many people have casual personality. They talk very casually. Sometimes they say yeah instead of yes, or whatever. Sometimes they say like, and stuff. I want you to think about not saying those things when you're speaking to people on the phone, setting up an interview, or if you're at a networking event, and especially in an interview setting. Try and speak clearly and sound professional. Goes without saying, for your job search strategy, proper email address, proper voicemail greeting, no ringback tone. Call people back quickly. If it does go to voicemail, don't wait 3 days to call them. Have your references ready. If you've already gone in for an interview, they may ask you for your references. You should have references ready ahead of time, and ask people if it's okay to use them for multiple jobs. Jason Weiser actually has you check every single time you want to use him as a reference. Because he says yes for one job that you've applied to does not mean he agrees to be your reference for another. You actually have to check with him each time. Versus if you had me as a reference, I would expect you'd give me a heads up each time that I might get called and send me the link, but I won't make you check with me each time once I've said yes. So make sure that your references have given you clear instructions on what's acceptable to them. And just so you know, Jason, if you want him to be your reference, you're going to have to ask him each time. Michael.
Good. So, our references can also be like someone we had in class back in high school.
A high school teacher as a reference?
Yeah.
I would prefer that you choose more recent references. If you can't think of anyone, then yeah, if that high school teacher knew you very well. But if you can find current college teachers, that's even better. Other places to look for jobs. Sometimes, question? No. Sometimes colleges and universities have animation positions. It could be media assistant or something like that. It could be within their own media department, or it might have something to do with if you're interested in graphic design. You might want to get a job at a college so you can further your education. You might want to get a master's somewhere, so it's in your best interest to try and get a job there, so your master's is free. Kind of like what I'm doing. So look at hireatjobs.com, which is on here, and see if there are any jobs in animation. Typically there are not. Sometimes there are graphic design jobs. You're all going to have great Photoshop skills. That's within your realm. So that's something to consider. And also as a part-time job, while you're looking for full-time work, graphic design work is great to pick up. If you can crank out a few logos or a few website designs in the 3 months that it takes you to find a job, they're better paying and look better on a resume than part-time roller rink receptionist. So think about part-time jobs that will actually help you in your career. Let's see. And also hardware and software companies. I went to school for graphic design. I will be the first to admit I was not the best graphic designer. Hard to believe, I know. But there were people that were more efficient and more creative than I was. I recognized this, and luckily I fell into project management. So I didn't have to design stuff from scratch. I could actually work with the really creative people, but just kind of manage the process. So I was lucky. If you love being creative, but you know you're not out of this world creative, which I wasn't, there are opportunities in animation that are not creative production. If you're organized, if you're business-minded, you could be a project manager. You could work for a hardware company that sells graphics cards, like NVIDIA. You could work for a software company that, like Autodesk or Adobe or who makes ZBrush?
Pixelogic.
Pixelogic or Toon Boom. They're in Canada. So you could work for a software company. If you're a people person, if you love travel, you could be a software rep and you could go all over the country talking to educational institutions about purchasing the software. If it's a software program you like and you can talk about it, even if you're not an expert, you could work for a software company. So there are other options other than production as well.
Is software prepping allow you to travel around?
Software prepping?
Whatever you said, that's...
Software sales? Yes. Software sales very often includes travel. Artist does not include travel. People don't just send their artists off because they kind of need them to stay there and work. However, if you kind of show initiative that you can represent the company well, maybe they'll send you to a conference. Usually it's above and beyond what your artistic duties are though, so it can be kind of tricky, but you can recognize who's being sent to SIGGRAPH, who is being sent to E3 or Comic-Con or what, and then figure out what you need to do to have your company pay for you to go. Offer to do a demo or a presentation, offer to speak, offer to work the booth. Those are great ways to get a free ticket to a conference. Speaking of conferences, GDC and SIGGRAPH and PAX, those are animation and gaming conferences. Anyone not know what those three are? Good, because I don't keep you guys here till midnight talking about all that stuff. Those are three amazing conferences. They take volunteers. I highly recommend you volunteer. Has anyone ever volunteered for any of those three specific conferences? We have had students here who have volunteered for PAX as well as GDC and SIGGRAPH. It's a life-changing event. And especially if you go out to California or wherever SIGGRAPH is going to be, Vancouver this year, you meet some amazing people, you meet some amazing companies. The selection process for volunteering is not easy. You have to write an essay, you need letters of recommendation for SIGGRAPH and GDC. The deadlines for these are usually around December. So it's something you need to think about soon if you're going to apply. You have to get your application, your letters of recommendation, your resume very often. You have to get all that to them by a specific deadline. GDC, Game Developers Conference, is typically in March. SIGGRAPH is typically in August. It's competitive. It's really hard to get chosen as a volunteer. So you want to write a very good essay and have great people recommending you. It's not just, oh, they'll pick me because I'm working for free. No. They have a lot of people that come back every year because it's such a great experience. Ask Jason Weiser if you want to know about working for GDC. He will tell you all the amazing benefits. And I believe if you apply and get selected for GDC or SIGGRAPH, they pay for your housing, so you only have to pay for airfare. They pay for one or the other. No? Okay. Well, they pay for something, so they either offer subsidized housing, or sometimes they'll pay for your travel expense, or they'll pay for some of your local travel expense. So it's not as expensive as you would think. I've had plenty of students go out to San Francisco and stay at hostels. They're very cheap hotels where you usually have a shared bathroom and sometimes a shared room. Or they'll go 4 people to a hotel room, which becomes a little more affordable. They're usually in sketchy neighborhoods. If you go to San Francisco, just know there's a lot of petty crime. People will steal your stuff. Don't leave your stuff anywhere. They steal it. Don't rent a car and leave stuff on the seat. They'll break in and take it. San Francisco just has a lot of crime. But it's a nice city. New York as well. So getting to the conference, again, I know we're not all made of money. It's a phenomenal opportunity. Ask for this for Christmas instead of a new PlayStation game, instead of whatever. Ask your parents to help you get to GDC or SIGGRAPH. PAX is a little bit easier to volunteer, although because it's gaining popularity, it'll probably become more competitive. PAX happens in Boston in March or April. PAX stands for Penny Arcade Conference. I don't know where the X comes from. Expo, there we go. Thank you. PAX is great. It's been in Boston 2 years in a row. It was the largest conference to come to the Boston Conference and Exhibition Center, and it'll probably be pretty large next year as well. Fantastic volunteer opportunity. Highly recommend you do it. PAX is a little easier to volunteer for than to get to California or wherever these conferences are, but I really, really recommend if you want to work in games, apply to be a volunteer at GDC. If you want to work in animation, for film, if you ever want to work for Pixar, Disney, Sony, Rhythm and Hues, apply to be a volunteer at SIGGRAPH. Go to SIGGRAPH. Or go to SIGGRAPH. Don't be a volunteer, just pay to go. Student tickets are usually cheaper than the couple $1,000 full price tickets. So you can get one for as little as $200. Conferences are amazing. You meet meet hiring managers, people that work at these places, artists for Blue Sky Studios. Speaking of which, who's going to the event on Friday? Who knows what I'm talking about? Who doesn't know what I'm talking about? Oh boy. So I apologize that